Hi and welcome everyone to this part of the CFP series. We are currently in part 2 for the CFP series. In part 1, we discussed a lot about security conferences as a part of effective paper submission, and we looked at the CFP process itself. How does it start? When does it start? What to track and things like that. And then we also looked at different kind of papers that you can submit. In this part, which is part 2, we'll be discussing when do you actually go ahead and submit your paper, what is the time in your research or stage in the research when you should be doing that, how to write a paper, what are the things to actually outline and also elaborate upon for the reviewers to get or to be able to convey the point correctly. And we'll also go through some of the paper samples. The first thing that I wanted to show you is typically the idea of a paper, right? So when you are going to submit, you have done your research, probably it's in a particular domain, technical domain, and you're trying to solve a problem statement. How does a typical paper look like in the academic circles is a lot what impacts the way we want to look at a paper when it is submitted, and hence we start off with that inspiration here. For the paper, when you look at the paper, the first thing that you can see is the title. So the title itself can be self-explanatory. It can be very short. It can be a little dramatic as well. You will see many papers have that kind of a thing. In the academic circles, when you submit it, it's pretty plain and straightforward in most of the cases to be able to better convey the idea, which is always good. When you submit the paper, you can take your creative liberty and dramatize that a little bit, but the idea is to convey the point nonetheless. Now, here you will see, typically in the paper, you will have your contributors, because you may be not just a single person doing the research, there may be many of you who are doing this research, so all the names should come in along with the designation place that they work in, and the abstract. You will see the first part. We will go in the details of what all of this should contain in how to write the paper, but this is where the abstract comes in first, because that's talking about what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and that is one of the most relevant points when you're looking at how substantial the paper is, how substantial, significant the paper is in the larger scheme of things. Then you're looking at the introduction and talking about the systems and all of that. And then you go into the detail of the whole paper. So this is what typically it will look like. There are a lot of recommendation and guidance available already online, which you can check out for academic papers and how you write that. I would highly recommend, if you are interested in submitting to security conferences, go ahead and check those out. I'll try and link some of them below. There are more episodes coming up in this series where I'll be talking more about it, so stay tuned for those. Let's talk about when you should submit a paper. Now that you're doing your research, or you're thinking about something, you may be actually working in a certain domain. You may be already trying to solve a problem for your client, for your company, for the product that your company makes. So many things. Or you may have a passion project where you're just looking at a new area, a new technology and all of that. So that comes in first. So when is it that you should submit a paper? Generally is when you are working on a new technology, rather than, for example, pen testing. And pen testing has been there for a while now. It's been quite a few years. If it is general pen testing, if you're just working on, OWASP top 10, there's nothing largely new in that. So that may not be the right time to actually take it, transform it into a paper and submit, because there's really nothing new in that, unless you have contributed to a new attack, to a new approach, or to a new technique, for example, to exploit something. So new research is a very good point to start thinking of submitting a paper where you're working on a new area, new technology, or you are working on a new approach, or you're highly optimizing a process in the defensive security space, for example, or even in the attack space. So these are the times when you should think of actually putting it in a paper, sharing it with the community. This is just a means to do that. It could be a new technology, language, even concept. It could be a new framework that has come up and you are the one executing it and you found a lot of new things around that. It could be a new issue, attack, gap in a protocol that exists for a long while, but nobody found that, right? So all of those things are a pretty good place to start thinking about. Of course, not just the research, but also to submit it as a paper. It could be attack, bugs, it could be new tech, it could be new tool that you came up with. Now, it could be new framework, right? When you're talking about defensive security, there's always this question, and I want to actually also tackle that a little bit here. When you are doing offensive security research, it seems to be pretty black and white. If you have a new attack, talk about it. If you have a CVE vulnerability that you discovered, it's your original research, talk about it. But what do you do when you're contributing heavily in the defensive security space? You need to actually ask yourself, is there a new framework model that you're working with that will be valuable to the community or to companies that work at scale, or to companies which are just starting new? What is it that you can actually contribute that did not exist earlier? It's a very simple question to ask. The answer will tell you yes, you should go for submitting a paper. You also have applied security. You have various ways of working, because in defensive security, which is as contrast to offensive security, we are working with a lot of teams, engineers, you're working with vendors, you're working with various groups in the community, and so on and so forth. It makes sense whenever there are newer ways of working which are highly effective that you have found, which will impact enterprises at scale. You can definitely go ahead and talk about it, even if it's cultural, it's non-technical, but it's adding something new in the way we look at things, new in the way that we are able to quantitatively derive the outcomes in terms of impact. So if it has greater impact in security, then yes, this is something that you should talk about. The impact in security and how do we talk about it, we'll discuss in the later slides. In applied security, there are many programs that we run, right? So when we start applying security, so whether it is an established framework or standard or something, where you implemented that in your organization and you did it through a set of programs or whatnot, the idea is when you did that implementation, if you optimize something heavily, or you change the approach, or you automated things which traditionally people don't or find it challenging to automate, you're solving a big problem for enterprises and industry. That's also a good thing to talk about. One large part of solving problems in security is also automation, whether it is offense or defense. And when you do that, it makes sense to talk about what you automated, how you automated that, all those details, and also making sense for, okay, additionally you could increase performance, or you could without impacting performance in a way, because security often can be at the edge when it comes to performance. That becomes a trade-off when you're adding security, right? So if you could do that, or if you could scale the solution for hundreds of thousands of developers or the organization and stuff like that, that's also a great thing to talk about if you're working in that area. So this is when you can think of, just let's go ahead and talk about it. And that brings us to the point of how, you have done your research in security, and you have all these pointers. There's a problem that I'm solving. There's something new that I'm bringing to the table, I and my team, or there is something that I'm releasing that the industry will benefit from. Now comes the point of how do I structure it? There are submission guidelines that you will find in every conference website. They do talk about what it is that they would like to see. They have specific questions asked in each of these areas. For example, your abstract, like we just talked about, heavily talks about the problem statement. You give your bio in terms of your profile. It really adds up, and it also shows your experience in that domain or area, not just in speaking, but also in that domain. So that calls out for your domain expertise. If it is also an area that you work in day out, then you definitely have more experience in that area. The detailed outline, which we will talk about, how detailed you should go in the outline. Try to provide as much detail as you can, putting it simply. Then also talk about the key takeaways. This is also a point where you will, if you don't know anything else, whether this paper it has a good standing amongst all the other research papers, just one shortcut is to think of, okay, what are the key takeaways for the audience? If I was in the audience, would I really like the takeaways? Can I take it? Is it actionable? Can I take it back, work on it? Is it something that I can execute from day one? Is it an automation that I'm giving? Is it a standard that they can work? Have I structured things so well that everybody in the industry can go ahead and apply it, and it stands true for most of the environments and surroundings? So these are a few things that you can ask yourself, and that should give you a clear idea of, yes, it has a good standing amongst all the other papers, hundreds of other papers that are being submitted. There are also demos, so the more hands-on and practical knowledge you have in terms of implementing or actually carrying out the attack or the exploit really gives it a more weightage. So wherever you have done that, it makes sense to add all of that in the paper. So the value add overall, whether it is by automation, innovation, approach, technology, or whatever, should be clearly called out in the paper. There are different paper formats. This is something for you to really think, because if it gets selected, you should be able to do justice with respect to the topic and the amount of research that you've done. Can you deliver it in, depending on the conference format, it could be 20, 30, 45 minutes or even more in terms of workshop style talks. Will it be enough? So that is something that you have to take a call and put it forward. So what is the real approach to writing a paper? We know that these outlines are asked for and we need to submit that detail. Now, this is where I have seen many papers go not wrong essentially, but they're not enough. Why they're not enough? Because most of the times we are not able to find, if the paper we think has a lot of potential, but we are not able to still select it, there is a lot of information which is missing. Either the problem statement has not been correctly defined, or you've not provided enough details of how you're solving something, and that counts when there are maybe 10 other people very clearly talking about the same problem statement, maybe in a very, very clear way, right? So put yourself in the shoes of the reviewer and just think of, would I select this paper? One of the ways to write paper effectively will be first coming to the problem statement. Your problem domain has to be very clear. You have to talk about the relevance of the problem statement as of today. So for example, you're talking about a buffer overflow, and it's a user land buffer overflow, right? It's not a kernel based buffer overflow. So if it is a user land based buffer overflow, that there may be other papers, of course, there always are other papers where they're also talking about that. So you need to really clarify what is the specific problem that you're solving by this, or for example, with the specific vulnerability. In this case, it would be a vulnerability, for example, that you're finding. Then what is that specific place where you have that? And how did you approach it? So in the problem statement, which is generally will go in the abstract, you have to just minimize it, talk about where or what the problem is and what you have done to solve it in a very, very high level language. Then comes the part where you detail it. When you detail it, it's important to specifically talk about the environment, the ecosystem. So for example, you may find it in Windows or you may find it in Linux. That completely changes the flavor of the paper, because now the significance, relevance, how many people interact with these systems actually changes from a technical standpoint. So you have to call out, exactly maybe which, if it was an issue found in a specific file or a DLL, those kind of things have to be called out. In this case, specific version of Windows, for example, where you found it. So all those OS, hardware, file level and other details you have to start talking about first with relation to the problem statement. So this is what exists today. This is the problem with this, file or this variable or wherever you found the issue. You have to talk about what is the existing state of controls around that or lack of controls. what are the other headers, services, field level details which are there, which is actually pointing towards eventually the vulnerability. Now, then you talk about the vulnerability itself. See, this is the current state, and hence this is the vulnerability. And how did you solve that? What did you specifically find happens? And this is what you need to talk about in the how. So the vulnerability, the attack, what are the variations you found? Are there other products where you found it? Other kind of files? Are there analogous systems where you found it? All of those. It's better if you refer to them specifically. That also brings about a credibility of your research that you have actually done. And if there is existing research in this field, it's a good thing to add. If you know that people may confuse your research with some others research which is in this similar field, it's always good to point that, hey, there is existing research in this, but this is what I am talking about, and it is actually different. It has not been talked about earlier, for example, and all those things are inputs to the reviewers that, hey, this is a unique paper. Another thing that makes the paper actually more authentic is when you add your original work. So if you have, for example, you found the vulnerability and then you want to call out the CVE that was allocated to it. There are many papers that I've seen myself where they have genuinely found out a vulnerability, but they haven't even named or given the CVE ID for that, right? Generally, in many cases, we would find that out, but it's best to not leave it to the reviewer to go ahead and check or be confused about it, or just think that maybe this is not original work. It's important, if you have any such markers, to call that out. If you have submitted a paper in other journals, any of the journals, places, if you have blogs that you've written around it, it's important to call that out here. One thing to call out is that there are many respectable journals where we see papers which are published that brings out a lot of authenticity for the work itself and the originality of the work. But if it is there in too many places already, so for the last 2-3 years, you have been talking about it in various conferences, and then you come down to the Nth conference, if this is your Nth conference, for example, then because it has been published multiple times, it may not be something that any conference would like to have, because it's already there in public. There is nothing new for people to know from here. So that is something to keep in mind when you are publishing it. So be selective on where you want to publish, and then that increases your chances of getting the paper selected. Lastly, the results. I'm talking about the results more from a perspective of a quantitative impact that you were able to bring with this. Now, I agree that for many new work, new technique, new approaches that we create, we may not always be able to quantify it, but try to quantify it as much as possible. So this particularly impacts the defensive security papers, which we see very less of, which we have a lot of room to see papers in that direction. Is we talk about the work that we do, but we do not talk about the impact that it created. Now, you have to see from a reviewer standpoint, how does that differentiate your paper as opposed to somebody else's paper who has done similar work or who has done work in another area, and they're also not talking about, they're also not quantifying. Then it stands an equal chance, but just imagine if you can quantify that, it becomes very easy and clear for whoever is reviewing to understand what was the real impact, what are the real conclusion, what are the real result. So numbers and statistics matter a lot. Exploitability, in case it's a vulnerability or attack, new attack surface, that matters a lot. Impact matters a lot. So all of these things matter. And of course, if it's authentic, if it's your original work, disclosures also matter. Many conferences today are looking at whether something has been disclosed, and we are always looking for responsible disclosures. So you have reported it to the vendor, they are okay, they have released a patch, they're okay with you going ahead and talking about it. Really gives comfort to all of us. In that case, do mention the disclosure details in the paper itself. So this is just a limited set. There are a lot of other things, but definitely these are few things that you should be able to call out in the paper description or outline, or wherever you have the largest space to talk about your research and your work. I want to take you through a sample bad outline just so that we understand what we have been talking about till now. This is one I've just a sample I've taken from DEFCON's website. They have this sample called out. You will see AI today is very relevant as a subject. So that itself, in the newness of it, carries weight. However, in the paper itself, I'll just read out for anyone who's listening. Paper is about AI and security. It will show some things about AI that are important for security. AI is used in security a lot. Okay. And as a reviewer, I'm still looking for, but what, so what? So we need to know how AI can help with security and also the problems it might have. Paper discusses some ideas. So in abstract itself, I did not really get a specific problem statement. There are problems with so many technologies everywhere, but so what, right? So always, this is although not literally how we think about it, but it's just an easy way to put it for anybody who's submitting. Would you say that those two words after you read that, then this is not a good abstract, right? So be specific about the problem statement. Second thing is, if you look at the outline, there is brief intro to AI and security. Most people know about it. AI security is very important in today's world. Yeah. So all of this, most of us know, is nothing new. You're not talking about the specific place, areas, domain, or subdomain within AI where you were able to solve any particular problem or discover one, for that matter. AI in security can be useful, and there are tools that use AI and blah blah blah, and AI is good. So this is actually not literally how you write it, but I think what they are trying to convey is the feeling that the reader gets, whether they are a reviewer or not. So the problem statement to me till now is not clear, right? Now, using AI for security, do demo to create a fake mail and a phishing demo. Well, this is a use case. I think as of today, it's highly used and it's cliched. So that itself will give it away for you. But if it was something else, you have to think that what is new and what you're bringing. The first thing that people would do is create phishing mails, because it is more on the English side that it corrects than on the security side. Because you have large language models that will help do that. So it will bring down the grammatical errors and all of that. It's fine, which is known. Sometimes it does not work well. Prompt examples of, so basically it is a part of prompt engineering where, you can try and craft phishing emails, which is okay. Like it's not something that's new at all as of today. But even if it was, I'm thinking from the perspective of when we first heard of LLMs being developed and ChatGPT coming in, even then you have to really have a strong, solid case of, using the tool just beyond what it does. So ChatGPT is made, it's made for these kind of assisting users with these kind of things. It could be of way how you're using ChatGPT, right? So we are not using tool usage kind of papers. We're looking for new things. So that's what you have to think. And this is also not clear. So this is how and why this outline is bad. There will be many others. It's important for you to read your own paper and just see if you are able to answer these questions. Sample good outline. So I wanted to take you through a quick paper. This is already published. It was, I think, last year's Black Hat USA. You can look at any of the conferences where you're submitting. Many times once these papers are published, they will publish the material itself also. Now this is not the submission paper, not the original paper that was submitted, but I will just sort of walk you through the material to be able to reverse engineer what all information the researcher might have definitely provided for this to stand out amongst hundreds of other good quality papers, right? So here you see all your secrets belong to us, leveraging firmware bugs to break TEEs. This is just talking about the presentation and abstract of the presentation, all of that. So when you go to the website, you can pick up any paper, and then if there are presentation materials available, you can actually go through that. Let me actually take you through the paper itself. So I have it open here. All your secrets belong to us. This is by Tom Dorman, and I like this example. I thought I'll just share it with you. You see, when the paper starts, this is not the paper. Okay, just a disclaimer, this is not the paper. I'm just helping you understand how you can actually reverse engineer if you are a new or if you're a beginner in paper submission, and how well some of these papers are structured. So you will see that first they're talking about what system they have exploited, so the first part, when I said the system, environment, and other things which you actually were working on, is something that you should talk about a little bit, and its state as of today. So it's talking about trusted execution environment, and it's talking about, okay, what that is, what it does, a bit of an intro, and some workflows around that, the platform security processor, reverse map table, because this is where eventually the exploitation will fall in. So it's good to, when you're giving an introduction, also talk about it a little bit on which are the related entities that will come into the picture in the least, right? So since this is a presentation, you will see this is talked about at a very high level. In a paper also it will be high level, because this is not the relevant part of the paper. Relevant part is yet to come. So it is the introduction that would have definitely have landed in the paper. Then they talk about their original CV that was allocated, right? This is 21980, and that has been clearly called out. Then they say, they jump into the vulnerability and why the vulnerability is there, and that is what should be called out. Here, I think they would have definitely taken a lot of slides. If I can see, you will see a lot of things in terms of the workflow, what happens, hypervisor writes the request to memory, the whole process of command dispatch is being called out with relation to the memory itself. That also shows technical depth. And I'm calling out these key things so that you know what is really standing out in the paper versus another one, right? And so many details is not what they generally provide. You will see they're maybe running into many slides. They actually talk about the summary of this, but in enough depth so that the reviewer understands that they have done the work, what exactly has taken place, how have they discovered the vulnerability, what the vulnerability is, and so on and so forth. Choosing a target. Okay, so now I'll take you ahead to the guest context pages. So this is now at the heart of where the exploitation is happening. So they are in the presentation itself, they would visualize this, right, for the audience to see. In the paper, they will not have these tables, but they will call out exactly the message that they want to convey about guest context pages, for example, and what role they played, and what they did with this, and so on. So I'm not going much deeper into it, but just to give you an idea. And this is where their code comes in, which is their exploit. So this is improved exploit, what the changes they made, and things like that. Decommission victim guest, corrupt UMC key seed with the same fixed values, exactly what they did. Now to the reviewer. So think of the reviewer. Now it's very clear, first of all, what they're trying to say, what they exploit. There's original work, there is technical depth, there's so much, right, in this paper. And the reviewer has not even seen the exact map table or the context pages and any of these things. Now there's another CV that they're talking about. So there are multiple related exploits that they did. It becomes very easy now to understand the related exploits as well, right? So all of these most probably would not have gone into the paper. Now coming down to the exploit. So this is where the exploit, and you will get a certain level of privilege if it is a privilege escalation bug or whatever it is. So the post exploitation bit you can talk about a little bit as well. That will actually, why? Because that will show the impact of the exploit. The reusability of the exploits, and a third bug that I discovered can be exploited using strategy 1, so on and so forth. So of course they have explored this enough. So that adds to the weightage of the paper. Then, and one thing is very important, although this is there in all the conference websites, I think most of the places, is what are the key takeaways for this. So for the key takeaways, this is where you clearly call out what your takeaways are. Now read your takeaways. So whether you read your outline or not, read your takeaways at least thrice before you submit. Hypervisor is very powerful. Even very simple bugs can have large security impact. Now you see all these CVs they have brought in together, and the juice from that work is something that they are talking about, because that at the end of the day is the takeaway for the audience. Even simple bugs can have large security impact, because maybe you can have multiple related impact in the related entities as well, right? The firmware used by SEV and other TEs deserves more attention from the researcher community, and of course demand as much transparency as possible in all parts of the stack, so on and so forth. One of the things for researchers, key takeaways, is how do you approach this problem? How do you have simple bug but be able to find more bugs, right? So if I am an offensive security researcher, I would want to know of such approaches that others are taking, which is how you grow as a community. So a lot of these takeaways have larger impacts than the CV itself, is something that the reviewers are also seeing. So yeah, that's all about this. I think going back to what we had, this is what I had in this video for this walkthrough. I hope you liked the walkthrough and you were able to understand the process of looking at papers, their presentation material, understand what outline, what is the depth to which details are provided in good papers, and that will help you in submitting your next paper. We'll see you in part 3. Until then, thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.